You are listening to LatinxAmerica, a podcast focused on highlighting catalysts who are using, leveraging, or creating technology to help our community achieve more. With your host, Adriana Flores Ragade.
Thank you for listening to our 10th episode. I hope that the personal and professional stories shared by our guests are inspiring you to achieve more and help others do the same. I am pleased to have Silvia Johnson join us for our milestone episode. Silvia Johnson is the CEO and principal consultant of HR Thriving, a premier leadership and HR consulting firm. Prior to HR Thriving, Silvia was the VP of Diversity and Global Talent at Symantec. During her tenure at Symantec, Silvia led the global sales divestiture of Veritas, supported several C-suite executives, and was a leader who transformed the way Symantec would attract, retain, and develop its diverse talent. Prior to joining Symantec, Silvia founded and led a strategic consulting organization that focused on working with business leaders and executive teams on business strategy, market growth, and change management. Before stepping into consulting, Silvia worked at Intuit in the San Francisco Bay Area, where she was a human resources business partner. In this role, she was responsible for the reinvention of the onboarding process, the organizational design of QuickBooks Online Edition, and the support of the QuickBooks core product line. Earlier in her career, Silvia oversaw M&A, university recruiting, and HR shared services as a human resources manager at Xilinx. Thank you again for joining us today. Let's start by learning about your personal journey into tech.
Sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. So I actually, a little bit about my personal journey, because I think it's important, is we actually emigrated here from El Salvador when I was 2. My family, there's 4 of us. I have older siblings, though. My sister's 15, was 15 at the time. One of my brothers was 13. The other one was 9 and I was 2, and we came here with our parents to the Bay Area, to the San Francisco Bay Area. And it was, one of those things that they wanted their kids to have a better life than they would in El Salvador. So you can imagine coming here, moving from a very different place where my mom was a homemaker there, my dad was a teacher, to coming here with 4 kids to work multiple jobs and really help us and get through school, right? That was a big thing for them. So instilled, obviously, with my parents sacrificing a lot to come here, as well as my dad being a teacher, that education was very important. So all of us actually went to college and all got our degrees. And given that I was sort of the baby, I saw what they did, my siblings, in terms of really striving and doing their best to really advance themselves in honor of our parents. And so when it was my turn, I went into school. It actually started in psychology. That was really the thing that I had passion for, and thought I was going to go on to get my master's or PhD and become a therapist. But in school during that process, I did an internship and realized, maybe sitting, talking to folks day in and day out about their problems was maybe not right for me after this internship. And it was at that point in time where I turned to my siblings, I turned to other mentors and said, okay, what do I do? What else can I do with this psychology degree? Because I want to make sure that I'm realizing this dream, not just for myself, but for my parents of doing well and succeeding here in the US. And that's when I learned about HR. So that's really what brought me to HR. And that was, again, through this help and sponsorship and support from all of them, my siblings, that is, and then other mentors. And so I began doing informational interviews, and through that process of talking to HR professionals, found that I had a passion for it and a bit of a knack for it, and started my career actually in retail HR at Macy's, helping them staff up one of the stores in Sunnyvale for the holiday season. And I was there for about 4 or 5 months when I got the call from tech. So again, the tech thing really came about because I had these informational interviews and talked to other people, and there were folks that said, "Hey, you have something. We're interested in you, but we just don't have a job for you right now," which was fine. But again, 5, 6 months down the line, all of a sudden, I got this call from a semiconductor company, which was Xilinx. And the rest is history there in terms of my time in tech, because since then, that's really been my area of focus.
Thank you, Sylvia. You have the perfect example of the power of role models. And in your case, your siblings all went to college and forged the path for you to follow, which is wonderful. Let's talk about your career. You recently transitioned from Symantec, where you were the VP of Diversity and Global Talent, and are now leading your own venture. Can you briefly talk about HR Thriving?
Sure, happily. So, it may not have come across just yet, but I am hugely passionate about the field of human resource. So, even though that was not where I started in terms of where my schooling was, uh, over the last almost 20 years that I've been in HR, I really do believe that human resource can contribute to a corporation in a way that no other roles within a company can. And so HR Thriving is something I'm sort of going back to. I had my own business prior to Symantec. Again, got asked to come in house, spent the last 5 years there learning a ton. And then now I'm really focused again on helping the HR profession rise and change so that it can contribute even more. I truly believe that corporate America needs to pivot and make you do things differently. And although there's a ton of information out there for leaders and how to engage employees, how to get the best out of them, there's not enough, I believe, within HR. And again, I think HR is uniquely positioned because we are the keepers of the people in many respects, to really change our game and up our game and how to influence those leaders and those companies that may not see the employees as the asset that they truly are, and in treating them in humane ways. So that's really where I'm focused, is how do we unleash that HR profession into its next evolution.
Sylvia, given your experience, how do you think we can increase the number of Latinx or other diverse communities in tech companies?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So, first of all, there is obviously the work that the tech companies themselves need to do in terms of really de-risking, I would say, the processes and the different aspects that help us bring folks into and then hold on to individuals of diverse backgrounds. So, for example, we all know, or perhaps some of your audience doesn't know, but there are ways that within writing a job description that may not appeal to a diverse audience. So looking into those, the companies need to look into those and say, how can I say this differently? How can I word this differently so we can attract and cast a wider net to be able to bring people in? Now, on the reverse side, we as the diverse folks within the world also need to build awareness and become aware of what tech companies have to offer. And I think the biggest thing, we've done great work around helping, Latinx and, other diverse talent understand the STEM field, but we are so focused on the hard sciences like engineering, like biology, chemistry, those types of things, that we forget that a company is comprised of a diverse set of roles. So, for example, maybe you don't want to become an engineer, but you want to be in a tech company. Well, there's finance roles, there's sales roles, there's customer support roles, there's HR roles, marketing, etc. So, really helping our communities understand that there's many ways into the tech field. And I think that will help continue to increase, that awareness will help continue to increase the people within that, the diverse people within the community.
What are some of the key characteristics that most companies look for?
Sure, sure. So, of course, there's the basics. To your point, in terms of job description, there's you need to have certain skill sets for the technical aspects of the job, right? Every role has a technical aspect. But I think if you really look intrinsically at what companies look for, especially tech companies, they're often looking for self-starters. They're looking for team players, folks that can collaborate. And then again, folks that have diverse thoughts, diverse viewpoints, and can have a constructive debate, not adversarial, but an actual constructive debate about their unique way of looking at the world. So I think those are the key components that are typical within a tech company and what you typically look for.
When it comes to compensation and based on conversations that I've had, it seems like it would help to know what a typical compensation package normally includes. Can you shed some light? And also, do you have any tips for negotiation?
Sure, sure, absolutely. So a typical package, especially within a tech company, has a few different components. So one is obviously your base pay. And your base pay is often what most people think about and what they hold on to in terms of what they want, right? What is that income coming in on a regular basis? But that's only one piece of it. Second to that, there's typically some sort of bonus structure. Sometimes it's a profit sharing component, which is as long as, however well the company does, then you share in that profit, hence profit sharing. Some of it can be a bonus that's also based on your own individual contribution. So a little bit about how the company does. And then on top of that, how well you do in terms of reaching and achieving your goals. Third to that is typically stock. A lot of smaller companies or startup companies still technically have stock options, which means it's deferred. When that stock becomes vested, and it's typically vested over a multiple year period, you don't get that up front. It's a commitment that you have from the company that says, hey, we believe that we're going to do better tomorrow than we're doing today. So here's this bit of the stock option, which means you can buy that in the future, but for a price that's lower than it will be in the future, is typically how you think about it. Or a lot of the bigger companies have moved to the publicly traded companies have moved to restricted stock units that when they are granted, they are actual stock grants that are given to you where they take taxes out. They also have a vesting cycle, so you typically don't get those right away either. They're usually 3 to 4 year cycles, although some of the bigger companies are moving to a more like a quarterly vesting. But that also has potential upside. So many people can look at that as additional cash flow and cash those in as soon as they get vested, or they can hang on to them if you believe in the company that they can do well over the course, the longer term, and you can see more return out of that. Finally, the fourth thing that we look at when we think about compensation packages is actually your health and medical benefits and all the other perks that come with that. Often people don't think about that, say 401k contributions or things of that nature. We don't think about those things because we take those for granted, but oftentimes those can be up to 30 and 40% of your total compensation package, of which we as people typically don't think about. So those four components are the ones that we more often than not think about from a rewards perspective, the investment that we as a company do for you as an individual. So those are the four key components. When it comes to negotiating, the one thing is be informed. Be informed about what it is you're looking at in terms of the company. What are those different components of it? Don't just think about the one thing, which is the base pay and the bonus, but look at all four of those components. And then with base pay specifically, because that's usually what you're negotiating, go off and due diligence. Glassdoor has a repository of information in terms of typical salaries, Indeed.com, a lot of other of those types of things. Find out what that fair market value, if you will, is for your particular role or the type of role that you're looking at to get a range, and then go in and ask for what you believe believe you're worth and you believe the job is worth, because it's both, right? It's the job and the market, and then what you can contribute to it.
You have worked at the C-suite level. What advice do you have for Latinx who want to move into upper leadership positions or maybe just take the next step in their careers?
Sure. So I think anybody who wants to move into leadership positions, one is understand what that leadership position truly entails. So one of the things that I feel often happens is people say, "Oh, I could do that job. I could move into that senior leadership position. Oh, if they only did X, Y, Z, they're overcomplicating things or what have you." So first is just know what you're getting into, because there's a lot of pressure at those levels. There's a lot of things that you need to juggle. But if that's truly where you want to go, believe me, having been there, having worked with that level, it is absolutely rewarding. You do have bigger ability to influence the company and where you're moving. So one is obviously learn about that role. Two is continue learning. Just because you've left school doesn't mean you don't continue learning, and that doesn't mean you have to go back and get an MBA or a master's of some sort or what have you. But it means keep studying, reading, going to conferences, listening to podcasts like this, enriching your life, surrounding yourself with others who are in those roles. So whether it's a mentorship, a sponsorship, seeking folks out, there are people throughout the world who want to help others gain their dreams and realize those. And I think a big piece of it is, and you'll hear this as a thread, I think, throughout this podcast, is go off and seek it. If we're sitting around waiting for somebody to help us, it's less likely to happen. So we have to have agency for ourselves and get out there and ask for that help.
Thanks, Sylvia. We've all had highs and lows in our careers, as well as times when we kind of doubted ourselves. Can you recall a moment in your career when you either doubted yourself and overcame this doubt? And also, can you share the process that you went through in doing so? I am especially interested in your response because of your extensive experience in HR. Your introspection and advice on how you dealt with it would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I'm sure there've been countless times where I've doubted myself. That I think that's part of the human spirit. So one, for all of you out there who's, doubt yourselves, and, Sylvia or, whomever has this ease and ability, that's just not the case. You live in my head for a little while and you'll feel it too. But I would say that the biggest time that I remember was which was really formative, was the first time when I started my business, that 5 years prior to being at Semantic. So 10 years now ago, when I left Intuit and started my own business. That was, I would say, one of the biggest personal development journeys, because you do think, and especially in the corporate setting, you do good work and typically that gets noticed and rewarded. And having your own business requires you to go out and you to advocate for yourself and whatnot. And there was a while there where I was unsure as to whether or not I could do it, whether or not I was good enough or capable enough. There's so many great consultants out there. There's so many folks that are doing amazing work. And definitely feeling small was a part of that in terms of my own journey. And so for me, what I did was I sought out a coach. And oftentimes when we're in those situations, you don't have to necessarily go out and pay for a coach, although I highly recommend them. I still use them. I still have one to this day. But even having those people that can help you think through and help you realize where your capacity can come from, where you can really see the difference between that fear that can be irrational with what's the art of the possible and taking that risk and moving forward. So that's really been the biggest thing for me. And now, having gone through that, having been through that journey. And now 5 years that I was at Symantec, where we went through a great deal of change, where I had so many firsts. I'd never divested groups of organizations or done massive acquisitions or led global talent or was the chief diversity officer for a company of that size. Each one of those moments, believe me, there's doubt, can I? But again, being surrounded with those supporters and again, for me, a coach specifically has really helped me through.
Silvia, some of the people listening might have internal blocks that they do not even know exist. How can they remove them and move forward in their careers just as you did?
Yes, absolutely. So internal blocks are huge when you're working through your own career and even other aspects of your life, whether it's your health, relationships, et cetera. So I think one thing is notice your own pattern of behavior. So I'm a huge advocate and proponent for folks really understanding themselves and their piece of the world. So really focusing on what are some of those patterns of behaviors. Do you find yourself falling into a certain pattern when you are met with a specific kind of situation? And really taking a moment and asking yourself why that is. What is the thing that's holding you back? Most of our blocks are really ones that come from childhood, to be perfectly honest. And those internal blocks from childhood are typically misunderstandings for how we reacted in a situation when we were typically within the age range of 5 and sometimes 10. That's when our beliefs, right? What we believe about ourselves and what we're capable of really form. And so really, as adults, we have to think about it from a more objective perspective. And now that we have a bit of information. So there's the school of thought of you go back and you really think about those and understand where they came from so then you can move forward. Or second, you can also think about them if what are the bigger goals? What are the bigger things that you want to achieve that are so much more motivating, so much more important to you that it makes you move through an internal block, right? Perhaps you want to help your family or you want to really succeed succeed in the XYZ way because that's really what's going to mean something to you. But whatever that goal is that's bigger, sometimes that can also help us through those internal blocks.
Good advice. Let's move on to a more positive side. Since you have worked with people who have also been very successful like you, what have you seen are some of the most successful pathways for people in tech? And what do people need to do or know to advance their careers nowadays?
Sure. So yeah, absolutely. I've seen folks that are highly successful. I mean, one of my leaders that I supported, who was at the C-suite, he was someone that didn't even have a college degree. Now that's not as usual as you can imagine in tech. Typically, you have a college degree, but he made it through because he had gumption, right? He was a self-starter. So I go back to those things in terms of self-starter, team player, having diverse thoughts in terms of characteristics that most tech companies look for. Those are the type of people that typically succeed. So if you're out there actually seeing problems within your sphere and you're going after them, you're pointing them out, and not just pointing them out, but saying, hey, here's some solutions. And oh, by the way, I'd love to go after them. That's going to be something that is looked on favorably that helps you grow. So I think there's a few things. One is in terms of your own career and taking agency of your career is one, know where you want to go. And it doesn't need to be, oh, I want to be in the C-suite. Maybe it's just that next 1 or 2 steps in front of you. And really talking to your manager or your leaders and making sure that they're aware that that's what you have aspiration for. Second is taking on projects that are sort of extracurricular projects outside of just the scope of your work, but that you can really support and make sure that you're taking on to, again, give you more experience, more exposure, and shows your value. So I think those are the key components of it. And it's standard. I mean, even outside of tech, I would say if you're that kind of person, you're more likely to be rewarded and move forward.
Some people might call this grit. And actually, I just came across a powerful human story related to our conversation. The story was shared via social media in a post where a 26-year-old man was standing at a freeway exit in Mountain View, California, handing out his resume because he came out here from Texas. He had gone to Texas A&M, and he was trying to launch a startup that unfortunately did not go anywhere, and he was left homeless and jobless. So, as his last resort, after sending many resumes, he literally put himself out there and started handing out resumes at the freeway exit. And fortunately, he now has 200 job offers. And speaking of grit and moving forward and self efficacy, are there resources that you recommend to people who are job searching in this industry or transitioning or looking to increase their skill set?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a little bit old fashioned. Obviously, people can do searches online. They can use Glassdoor is huge, LinkedIn is huge in terms of being able to research specific companies or jobs, et cetera. But just a huge proponent of the informational interview. So it's one that you're not expecting anything out of. You're really just there to learn a little bit more about either a company or a job. And really, it's about looking through your network. It's either going to a conference or a workshop if you don't know anybody in that particular field or particular company, or looking through your LinkedIn profile. So most of us are a couple of degrees away from a specific company or role. And so it's about finding folks to have those conversations. No matter what folks say, yes, there's ways that you can spruce up your resume, make sure that it stands out, make sure that it's aligned to a job description, submit it to a company, what have you, but nothing will ever top that human interaction. So the more you can, like that story you just told, the more you can have that grit and that gumption to go out. And you don't again have to be the guy on the side of the road handing out the resumes, especially if that's not aligned to your personality. But there isn't a problem with picking up the phone or sending an email or a query, a message to just say, hey, I want to learn more. I want to get into this company and I'd love to learn more, and having a little bit of tenacity because you may not get in that first conversation.
Yes, and it makes sense to have that personal connection no matter what type of position one is pursuing. Sylvia, we discussed resources, so let's learn more about who we might want to follow. Are there thought leaders or influencers that you follow or recommend people follow?
Oh, absolutely. So, one of my personal favorites is Brendan Burchard. He's again going to be more about your high performance, really taking that sort of psychological view for yourself. Now, he mostly helps a lot of entrepreneurs, but I do love a lot of his stuff. He just actually published a book on high performing habits, which it's been wonderful read, really great, lots of really good nuggets. Brene Brown is a huge one for me as well. Again, also about leadership and vulnerability and how do you show up in the world. And then, of course, I'm a huge proponent of looking at like a Sir Richard Branson's feed. Bill Gates has some really great stuff right now if you really are interested in leadership and tech and the like.
Melinda Gates actually posts a lot on girls and women in tech and building the next generation of leaders. You have been a leader in the HR profession. Can you share with us who has had the most personal and or professional influence on you and why?
Sure. So I'm not just going to say one person. I would say it's my family as a whole. So I would start with obviously my parents and the fact that they moved here for us to help us have a bigger life or better life. But then also my siblings. So as I mentioned earlier, they are 7, 11, and 13 years older. So further along than I was as I was growing and learning and whatnot. My sister, of course, being the eldest, she starting off in a JC because we couldn't afford for her to go to college, 4-year school, and then going off to college and then eventually at Genentech, of which she's still there. My next oldest brother, who went to Cal Poly, got grants and student loans and went his way into that. And actually, he's an engineer, so in the engineering field, who's now at Apple and had quite a successful career in many other semiconductor companies. And then, of course, my brother, who's the closest to age in me, but still 7 years older than I, who also went to school and has climbed his way up in his role at Oracle, and who now leads a part of the sales organization over there. So they have all been strong influencers, and maybe there's been a little bit of competition, but mostly it's been all positive for us to move forward and help me in shaping who I am, both personally and professionally.
I have to say, this is very impressive. With a sister in research, running a lab, a brother in sales, another brother in engineering, and you in HR, you can actually start your own company with homegrown talent. It really uplifts my heart to hear your story, and it gives me hope that others will be inspired by your family story and by your professional advice as well. Silvia, I want to be sure we mine your expertise as much as we can so our listeners can benefit. Is there any advice that you would like to impart that you have not yet mentioned during our conversation?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just would say tech is a rewarding field. So if anybody has interest, but maybe has been hesitant about it, come on over, come into the field. Tech is not going away. It's going to continue evolving. I think we're at a point of inflection as well, where there's enough awareness about that things need to change in terms of the nature of the diversity of the organization in order to be, or the field, if you will, in order for it to continue moving forward, and really continuing to pull us as a species, right, as a race, into something different. So the more diverse folks that we have, the better, because again, it helps us innovate, it helps us think differently. And so from that standpoint, I would love to see more folks, Latinx folks and other diverse folks in the field. And again, I go back to, it's not just engineering. So you don't have to just do that technical side of it. There's plenty of other space and room for others who maybe just have a passion for technology, but not in coding itself.
Thank you, Silvia. Finally, what is your next play or your next move or a goal that you want to accomplish in the near future?
Yeah. So, there's some intermediate goals that I have, of course. I'm actually in conversations with a couple companies who want to see HRO. And so I may do that. But again, as I spoke earlier in terms of HR thriving, one of the big things for me is about up-leveling the HR profession and taking us out of the dark ages in corporate America. I really do believe that it's a place where we can not only survive, but thrive. And so that's going to be my next big move. So we'll see where that goes.
Well, keep us posted. Thank you again for sharing your time and your expertise, and we look forward to having additional conversations with you and following your trajectory.
Great. Thank you so much.
Given Silvia's extensive experience in HR, our goal was to share practical advice that anyone can follow. So here are some key takeaways and action items. Just like Silvia did at the beginning of her career, begin scheduling informational interviews that will place you in the radar of people and companies that you might want to join. If you're transitioning into a new area, it's even more important to schedule them and become aware of what tech companies have to offer. If you work in an HR function within your organization, discuss Silvia's advice with your team and find a way to create job descriptions that will help you attract a more diverse talent pool. Finally, Silvia walked us through the 4 key components typically offered in a compensation package. Be sure to understand each component and do your research on Glassdoor or other resources that she mentioned so you can negotiate the best package for you and have a very successful career. Don't forget to share this episode with others and also leave a review so we can continue to provide useful advice through powerful stories.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook at LatinxAmerica and on Twitter at America Latinx, or email any questions or ideas to latinxamerica@gmail.com. Gracias y hasta la próxima semana.